We're going to dive in. So we're in this series called Neighbors, and really, as I've been kind of going through this, and as we were out, and our neighbors loved us, and they helped us out, it really made me do this reflection and looking around, and I saw this series was out there, and I saw this, and I said, you know what I really want to be able to do is teach on what it means to be a neighbor. See, the thing is a lot of us are lonely. Anybody in here, you don't have to admit that you're lonely, but anybody in here, when you think of loneliness, do you think of the people that are in this room? So don't put your hands up, but there's people in this room right now that are lonely. They don't have friendships. You know, when you think of loneliness, a lot of times we think of older adults, we think of the widow, very rarely do we think of the person that's 2 seats over from you. You know, you have to really broaden your thinking. We talked about that last week when we started broadening your thinking about what is poverty. What does poverty look like? And sometimes you have to open up your thoughts and open up what you're looking at. So this week, like this loneliness. Think about loneliness. Sometimes you can find those people that are lonely because they're irritated all the time. You know, that you can just find that. The loneliness kind of comes along, or they feel that there's this alienation that's happened. When people are lonely, they feel that they've been alienated, that they're just kind of out there all on their own. People just don't care. There's a lot of times what you'll see happens there. You know, they sit in a crowded room and they feel all alone. That's just that loneliness that's always there. You know, or they're a stay-at-home mom and they always feel alone. They never feel that anybody's there. They never feel like they have anybody to talk to. I'm a stay-at-home mom. Everybody's at work. And then when they get off work, they're too tired to even have a relationship or a friendship. You know, you work around a lot of people, but don't have a single close friend. That's kind of that loneliness that you see. You know, maybe you're a college student and you're surrounded by others in a dorm, but you're still lonely. You know, you're a successful business leader, but don't have any friends. You're at the top of your game, but don't have a friend. You can be in a dysfunctional marriage and feel alone. These are all things that you start seeing where this loneliness is just everywhere around us. You start talking to people, you start meeting with people, and you start seeing that loneliness is it's ingrained almost into the fabrics of our lives right now, where you talk to people and they go, I just don't have any friends. I don't have anybody I can rely on. You know, we understand financial poverty. We understand not having money. One of those things you look at, I don't have any money, but do we understand relational poverty? Do we understand that part where you don't have a relationship and you don't have any friends or anybody to talk to, and you start having these things that come up? You know, we get the financial part is easy because you can go, they lack material things. You can see we can help with this. We can give here. We can take care of this. Or they're lacking in a support system to function. What do you do with loneliness? And how does that change, and what do you do? You know, this lack of love, this empathy, there's just not a support system, someone to listen to. You know, if you talk to people, you know, and especially if you're a guy, you know, and guys, you know, we're kind of one-minded. You know, I'm not lonely, I'm in the garage, just doing my thing. You know, my wife this morning, I'm very playful, and she told me, you're not going to use this in your sermon, and is she in here? You'd never use this in your sermon. And so this morning, I was in a playful mood. And you know, and playful, you know, that's guy talk thing. You know, so if you know what that means, then you kind of know where we're going. And she basically said, you know, that's not happening. And she goes, we got to get ready for church. I said, I am trying to get ready for church. You know, and she goes, no, I mean really ready. I go, I really am trying to get ready. What do you, and she goes, no, you would never, ever talk about this. And I just wanted to prove that I do listen. You know, and that's kind of one of the things. Isn't that what women want? They want us to listen. They want us to have this conversation and actually listen to what they say and hear them and really be able to not only just to repeat it and use it as a joke on stage, but to listen. And see, that's not just for women, though. That's for all of us. We all want that. We all want that ability to be able to have this conversation and know that the person's listening to us. Can you imagine the people that are on the street that are out there when we drive past them and we don't, you know, where they are financially burdened and living on the streets, and we just drive past them where we don't even pay attention to their need or what they're talking about or anything that's going on? Nobody's listening. Nobody hears what's going on. That loneliness gets even more and more you get separated more and more and more and more to where all of a sudden you're like, well, nobody even cares. I'll just sleep over here in the corner and nobody's going to say anything about it because they don't talk to me otherwise. They don't listen to me. It doesn't matter what I say or do. I'm irrelevant. That's what happens so often. That lack of love. You know, if you start looking at this and you start trying to figure out what causes these things? What causes this? So if you start looking, there's 4 major causes to what causes some of these lonelinesses, especially now, as there's these four major breakdown of families. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's been huge breakdowns of families in our culture, in our communities. You know, you look at and families don't look like what they used to look like. The families, you know, why are we in this emotional poverty? And it's just this breakdown of families. And if you look at it, the other thing is hundreds of years ago, even 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, we didn't have the increased mobility that we have now. You can go anywhere almost at any time, go any place. You can get in your car, so I always say, living in Fairfield's amazing because you go 2 hours, you can be at the beach. You go 2 hours the other direction, you can be in the snow. It's a perfect place to live. If you're a type of person that loves doing all these different things, you can go to Santa Cruz. We have this, but that increased mobility wasn't like this all the time. Remember, before my mom passed, we would talk, and she'd go, yeah, I live in San Francisco. It took us 9 hours to get to Lake Tahoe. 9 hours? Did you walk? What was going on? And no, the thing is, it took 9 hours because you ever driven up North Texas? And on the side of North Texas, there's these street signs, and it says Old Highway, and I don't remember the highway number, 40. Old Highway number 40. You drove up North Texas in order to get to Lake Tahoe. You went through towns, and it took forever to get there. It was different. And so when you went through a town, what would happen? You might actually get out of the car every once in a while and stop, and you got to know people. Now we have this mobility. You talk to people, and they go, oh, my, especially here in Fairfield, you talk to people, where's your best friend live at? Oh, they live in Vacaville. They live in Sassoon. They live in Vallejo. They live in American Canyon. They live here. They live there. That was never the case. It used to be where's your best friend? They live right there, right next door. We talk about everything because you had no place else to go. You wouldn't get in the car and go driving around everywhere to go find some friends. You met them right next door to you. You had relationships. This increased mobility has made it to where we actually have less friendships where we should actually have more. We should have more. We should have a greater span of friends, and we have less because we go, I can just go visit my friend in Oklahoma, whatever it is. We also, when you start looking at this, we've increased our workloads. We have heavy workloads now. You start talking to people, they don't work 8 hours anymore. They now, you talk to people, especially people that are in the professional industry, like professionals, not the blue collar type worker, but the professional type worker, instead of working an 8-hour day, they tend to work 10s, they tend to work 12s, they mandatory especially if you're like, our drummer is producing a video game, and as you're working on a video game, they go, it's going out in 4 weeks. You're staying until it's done. You sleep here. And sometimes that's what happens. Or even in those blue-collar industries, especially if you're the owner of your business, if you own your business, you work and you do what it takes to get it done. You work hours after hours, and it doesn't matter. Those heavy workloads have made it to where we place priority over things to get done rather than relationships. A lot of times we take those increased workloads and we go, I have to take care of this so I can take care of my family so I can enjoy that free time that I do get. It just happens. The other thing is this increase in social media. We have this deferred loneliness now. The rise of social media has made it to where you go, now I've got 400 friends. They're all on Facebook. We've never exchanged actually any sort of conversation other than on Facebook. And that has made it to why we don't actually have any real friends. We go, oh, they liked my photo. They must like me. No, they thought that your photo was kind of cool. And if I blew your bubble up just now, I'm sorry. Those people aren't really your friends if you don't actually talk to one another. If you don't have a conversation outside of Facebook, those aren't friends. Those are Facebook friends. It actually is titled that in Facebook. Facebook friend. Now, it doesn't say these are your real friends, because real friends, when you're doing really fun stuff, they actually are there with you. They show up with you, you do things together. Hey, let's go out. Now let's stay at home and play on the computer. That's where we're at, though. We've gotten to this mindset. Well, you have some friends that people think that they're friends because they're Xbox friends or they're PlayStation friends. Let's get on this game together and let's actually play whatever the game is that's popular at the time. And we'll always play together. We'll always be on the same squad. I have no idea what you look like. No clue. I know what your voice sounds like, but I have no idea what you look like, and I have no idea what type of person you are. You know, you start looking at this this social media has made it to where we have separated ourselves more, but still think that we're connected. And, you know, and the thing is, we were created to have relationships. God said when he created man, he said, it's not good for him to be alone. But we've made it to where we are alone. We've pulled ourselves away, and we're more and more away from people. We go, hey, let's create more technology to get us closer together, but it actually separates us further and further away from one another. We don't actually have relationships. We have basically digital friendships. No longer do we have real friendships. We have digital friendships. And how do we change this? How do we get to this point where we start loving the lonely? Because that's a big question. How do we love the lonely? Now, and you look at what Jesus did. How did Jesus love the lonely? What did he do? You know, and so what we can start with is so you're first and foremost, before it's any point or anything that's going to come up there, you have to ask God to give me the eyes to see those that are lonely. You have to pray for that. You have to go, God, please let me see with your eyes those that are lonely, those that are just in need of friendship, that are true friendship, not just one of these, hi, now I'm back to my Facebook. Like a true friendship. Look, I need to, God, give me those eyes. Now, I want to do this. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to close your eyes now, and I want you just to ask that. God, give us the eyes to see those that are hurting, those that have those hearts that are lonely, but they have those hearts that care. So I just want you to pray that. And then what I want you to ask is, God, bring that person to mind. Maybe it's somebody sitting 2 seats down from you, but no one knows who your person is right now. Maybe it's somebody at your office that often gets overlooked. Maybe it's somebody in the military that you work with. Maybe it's somebody, just think about it. Maybe it's somebody in your own home. Just ask that person to be brought to mind. Just go, God, please. And so you can bring your eyes back up, and I ask you, is that your challenge, even before we go any further, just to know, is to reach out. To actually start to love. Because I know that you just thought of somebody. God brought somebody to mind because you just asked him to. You just asked him, bring somebody to mind, and God says that what you ask for, I will deliver. As long as you ask with the right mindset and your heart is pure. God brought somebody to mind. Who do you need to reach out to? I love it what Jesus does is that when you go back and see Jesus, he loved with the touch. And so for some of you, get your mind out of the gutter. That's the type of touch. I know I brought it up earlier, but that's not the type. So Jesus comes into town in Matthew 8, and a man with leprosy knelt before Jesus and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Now, leprosy, we got to give you, so sometimes I break this down, but leprosy is one of these things, if it's left untreated, if you leave leprosy untreated, you'll die in about 10 years. It starts with fatigue and pain in the joints, and then what happens is that these scary spots start to develop. You know, these boils start to develop. Your body starts getting, covered with lumps, and they're full of pus, and it gets really, really, really nasty. Your face starts to change shape. You start to look more like doggish and animalish. It's very, 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 when you watch it happens, basically you get growths on your vocal cords, and it makes it to where you can stop talking. The body basically is decomposing while still being alive. That's what's happening with leprosy. And if you get this idea, and so when people with leprosy, when you would talk, they would be sent to the outskirts of town. And and towns back then were built on cities. Their cities were built on hills. And there's a reason why cities were built on hills. And there's a line that some of you guys know. You ever hear that line, poop rolls downhill? Well, it's from way back then. It's because what would happen is that in the early morning, that you would get up in the morning, you would go empty your chamber pot in the middle of the street. You know, if you had servants, they would empty it in the middle. And the higher your class was back then, the higher up the hill you lived. So if you were on the top of the hill, you were probably to that area. If you lived at the bottom of the hill, or as it comes to plateau, you probably had leprosy. And the reason why you probably had leprosy is because everybody pushed you to that direction. They pushed you out there because they didn't want to be around you. They were afraid of people with leprosy. They were like, ooh, ooh, oh, oh. They didn't know how it was transmitted. They were like, you stay over there. You stay at the bottom of the hill. And here's where Jesus is different. Jesus goes, and he sees this, and he sees what's happening. And if you look at it, Jesus reached out his hand and touched him. Now, back then, they would be like, what is wrong with you? What are you doing? But he reaches out, and he touches them. He goes, you know, and see, he touches them, and he says, I am willing, he said, be clean. And immediately he was cleansed. The touch. It wasn't one of these things where he looked at it and said, oh, no, I'm not touching you. I got to get out of here. I got to go. No, he reached down, and this is the thing, is that, have you ever seen something when you walk in the door, there's a difference between a handshake and a hug, right? There's a difference between a handshake and a hug. When somebody hugs, they're opening up. They become vulnerable with you. You know, when you both open up, that's a vulnerability. Back then, people were always on guard. They would stay closed off. So when you open up for a hug, you basically are saying, I'm willing to let my vulnerabilities down. Are you willing to do the same? And let's embrace. Let's come and love one another. Let's become. Jesus didn't have to touch him. If you think about it, think back then. Jesus didn't have to touch him. He could have said, oh, you're healed. Go away. He could have did that. Jesus healed other people just by speaking the words. Why do you think Jesus touched him? You know, it's maybe he didn't need healing from the leprosy. Maybe he needed healing from the rejection. You know, maybe we look at this a little differently. Maybe he didn't need healing from the leprosy. Maybe he needed healing from the rejection he'd been receiving for years and years and years. Maybe he needed love for that rejection. You know, isn't that what happens? We get rejected, and we close off, and we harden our hearts a little more, and then a little more, and then all of a sudden, our heart turns into a callus, to where it's no longer loving. It's very hard, and it's hardened, and people don't know who we are, because you've changed from where you were at to where you are now. So even though Manny isn't here, have you met Manny at the front door yet? You probably got a hug if you walked in, you know, when he walked, because that's what he does. Manny the hugger. You know, you walk in, you'd be like, dude, you're weird. But, you know, it's not weird. He's just going, he really wants to show that love and embrace. You know, and see, the thing is that some people have no idea. You know, there's some people you talk to in here, they haven't had a hug in weeks, months, years. It hasn't happened. They may even live with their children, and their children don't hug them. You know, I talked to Michael, my son, who was just up there, and he throws a fit anytime I want to talk to him. And I go, hey, buddy, come here, let me give you a hug. What? I just want to give you a hug. I'll come take it from you if I have to. He goes, and I go, I love you, buddy. I hate you, Dad. And it's like a game for him. It is. He's like, this is our game. And I go, that's not a game, buddy. You know, one day Dad might not be here, and you're going to go, and it's hard to tell your 5-year-old, one day Dad ain't going to be here. You may want to start changing that little attitude up. And he goes, I still hate you. Going upstairs to watch TV, Dad. And that's kind of how it works. You know, he gets up in the morning, you know, and our bedrooms are connected. You know, they go, because he's the youngest, and obviously, you know, he's got free reign to Mom. And so as he gets up in the morning, and if she gets up early and has to go work before I have to get out of bed, he'll walk in and he'll see me. I go, I'm just laying here too, buddy. Where's Mom at? She's at work. And then he goes back to his room. I asked her, does he ever do that for me? She's like, no. He comes in, gives me hugs, and loves on me. And I go, man, what did I do wrong? There's that sense of loneliness with your own child. And it happens. And I look at it and I go, man, what did I do wrong? And so, do you see how that can translate into every other aspect of our lives? where people aren't willing to open up and go, I love you, and give you a hug? What did I do wrong? What happened here? Where did the disconnect come in? What did I do? What happened? And if it's something within our own household, usually you start translating this because something drastically went wrong someplace. I talk to some people here, and they walk in the door, I love this place. It's the only place I ever get a hug every week. It's amazing that you hear it. What's the other thing we need to do? We need to love by listening. So you start looking at this and go, how well do you listen? And so I gave you the example for my wife this morning. Sometimes are you listening to get something you want? Or are you listening to be able to hear and to be able to understand and go, how do I help? And how do I help make changes here? And how do I help this person grow? Because a lot of times we just listen to hear what we want. We go, I want to hear this so I can respond right away, so I can give you my response, so I can give you my advice, so I can give you the direction that I think you should go. That's what happens. Most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They just don't. They listen with the intent to reply. You know, isn't that what happens? A lot of times, you ever read an email, and you're first, how fast can I get this back to them? And then accidentally hit reply to all, and you send it to a whole bunch of people that shouldn't have went to. But that's a lot of times you listen, and instead of listening with going, okay, let me understand where you're coming from, we listen with this intent to be able to respond. We want to be able to reply to what they're saying. If you go back into the Bible, there's two guys walking along, and one is depressed and lonely. The other has this eternal hope. And this comes out of, if you look at this and you're reading in Luke, and it's Luke 24, and Jesus asked them, what are you discussing together as you walk along? And they stood still, their faces downcast. And one of them, named Cleopas, asked him, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened here in the days? And Jesus asked him, what things? What things? He asked. And he just started listening. He tried to be, he sat here and he tried to focus on being interested, not being interesting. He tried to focus on going, how can I be interested in what they're saying rather than making myself interesting to what's going on here? I need to understand, know what's going on rather than try and build myself up here. One of the best tools that I've ever learned is to ask questions. A lot of times I sit down, and especially if we're doing a pastoral counseling session, I just ask questions. Because a lot of times you'll answer your own problem through the questions I ask. I'll ask questions, and a lot of times we'll go through the whole thing, and I'll go, what do you think you should do? I should do this, 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 and this. Sounds like a great plan. Ask the right questions, and a lot of people already know the answer, but you have to help them as well as understanding. Ask the right questions. When people talk to me, they go, you talk a lot. I do. I talk a lot. You get me in a conversation, might be trouble. It might be trouble. 3 hours later, service is late, everything's going on. And you go, those are good conversations. It actually takes work to make those conversations good. It's not one of those things that you just go in and you have to work at making conversation. You have to work at it. You have to listen. And did you know that the word listen has the same exact letters as the word silent? If you start listening, you should be silent as well, right? Ask people, tell me a story. I'd love to pray with you. I'd love to hear what's going on. You have to sit there and just be willing to hear what people have to say. I've heard some of the best stories of transformation just by listening, just by sitting down and listening. I go to conferences. I don't get to go talk, just listen. I just get to sit there and listen and get the direction. And I've learned some of the best stuff that I've come back and been able to teach here because of what I've listened and heard. You have no idea. If you're talking, you're not learning. If you're listening and you're applying that, maybe responding, and that's when you start learning. You start being able to apply it. You start being able to do something in your life. You have to get this understanding is that sometimes people don't want you to fix something. They just want to be heard. You don't need you to fix something all the time. And it's guys, we have this problem. We're fixers, right? Honey, this thing's broken. Well, then you're a listener. You're like, well, tell me about that. well, what's wrong with it? Can you tell me about how many drips per hour it does? And, you'll get all the questions you want out then. But usually when somebody asks those questions and what happens, they just really want somebody to listen who cares. They're not just listening because it's like, yeah, that's great. Because that's what happens a lot of time. As guys, we like to disconnect ourselves and our mind to some other place, and we'll just go, a lot of times we call it the man cave, sitting in front of the TV. Yeah, babe, I'll get that. Sure, whatever. And that's what happens. And you're not really listening. You might be hearing, and it might be going out. And you might be hearing, it might be coming into your brain, you can repeat it, but you're really off in some other place. If you go back into the Bible, Jesus was always going someplace. He very rarely stood around and did nothing. He was always going someplace. But what he did well was he loved with time as well. So Jesus loved with time, and he was never rushed, but he was always going someplace. When he was speaking with the crowd in Luke 5, he still loved. When he was asleep in Luke 8, he still loved. When he was on his way to perform a healing, he still loved. He always had time, and he always gave people time. When praying in Mark 1, he gave people time. When my mom died, we would have these questions, and we'd sit down, and and my wife asked me a couple weeks ago, and she goes, when you think about your mom, what goes through, and a lot of times, my mom, if you didn't know, was a recluse. She spent a lot of time at home. She spent a lot of time, even when we brought her up here from Arizona and we moved her into our home, she spent a lot of time being very separated. The whole time is that it's us and her three grandchildren, and she didn't really get this opportunity to know any of them because she didn't really take those chances to be able to make herself vulnerable. She just kind of kept that heart, I'm grandma, and I'm going to be mean, and that's kind of who she was, and that's how the kids kind of remember her. And the questions that sometimes we'd be sitting there, and we'd sit, and she never had these regrets. I didn't have a beautiful house. She never had that regret, and she never had that regret. And you talk to her, she didn't go, I didn't travel all these exotic places. That never once came out of her mouth the last couple of months of her life. Everything that came out of her mouth was, I wish I could have spent more time with the grandchildren. I wish I could have spent more time with your brother and sister. I wish I could have spent more time in relationship. It wasn't about where did I go, what stuff did I have. It was, I wish I could have spent more time. What do I regret? I regret that I didn't spend more time with her. I wish I could have spent more time with her. You see what happens? These are the regrets that we have. We don't regret the car that we bought. We regret the time that we didn't get to spend with those that help put it together or help us get the money to earn it. Those are the regrets we have. Then you start looking back and you're going to go, man, what is it? I feel this loneliness. And so the loneliness you feel is because we get so tied up into these personal belongings. We get so tied up in stuff that we've forgotten that it's all about relationships. We've forgotten that it's all about loving one another and spending time and actually showing somebody that you care and being willing to be open and vulnerable. Are you going to get hurt? Of course you're going to get hurt. Of course you are. But you get hurt when you're closed off because you have all the regrets. When you walk away, you're going to go, man, I wish I would have spent so much more time. When you lose somebody, that's the first thing that comes out. I wish I would have spent more time with them. I wish I would have been there. I wish I could have been there for this or that. It's never, wow, I wish I would have had the car that they had. That never comes up. Never. It never comes up. They lived in such a beautiful house. No. What comes up is how much time and how much of that time was quality. Spent time loving, listening, being willing to touch people that you don't think that are worthy. You look at them and you go, oh, they're not worthy. They are your brother and sister in Christ. They are just as worthy of everything that you have and more. Jesus said, I came for the sick. I came for the poor. And we're the ones that were going, oh, no, I have to have everything. And see, this is the problem. The problem is each and every one of us in here are rich. We may not feel rich. We may look at the standards around us and we go, I'm not rich. I don't have what they have, or I don't have what they have. But why don't we take a step backwards and look at the world as a whole? And if you were God looking down at the world and you started looking and you go, right there in North America, right in the middle of it, those are the richest people on the planet. We are. We are the richest people on the planet. And then you start looking back and you go just south of us, and it gets third world country and it gets drastically poor. And you go a little further than that, it gets even poorer and poorer and poorer, where people are living on a 50-pound bag of rice for the month. They have a bag of flour and a bag of rice. And they're going, this is what's going to get us through. You get upset if you have to eat top ramen twice. I had to eat that for lunch and dinner. I'm not doing it again tonight. They're eating rice and bread for the month. And you go, I don't have anything. Well, no, they don't have anything. You might live in a house and you may look at it and go, I don't like this place. I don't like the color of the walls. I don't like this. I don't like that. This, the carpet, oh, this is just horrible. I've been to houses that have no carpet, that have no walls. They actually have a sheet. And that sheet is tattered. It's got holes through it, and they're ecstatic that they have a roof over their head. They're ecstatic about it. I've been to places and you start looking at it, you start seeing these things, and we go, we're rich. We are rich here. And so what this begs the question is that Jesus came for those that are poor. And we're rich. We have a problem, right? What does it say in the Bible? It said it'd be easier. It'd be easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. Guys, we need to start getting to this point where we start realizing that He made us rich so that we could help others. He made us rich so that we can reach out and do more, so we could love, so we could do so much more for this community. He made us rich not to be selfish. He made us rich to be able to give back. He made us rich so that others around us didn't have to be lonely. You guys, you start looking at some of this. I can look back at my mom and I know that I could have loved her better. That's what I know. I know that I could have loved her better. And you think that, I did all these things, and what happens is we do things and we look and we go, I moved her, she moved to my house, and we took care of her, and we went through all this stuff. But how much in love did we do it with? At what point did the anger and the animosity come in? To where she could feel that. To where she knew that she became a burden rather than a child of God. Because isn't that what we've done to people around us? We've turned them into a burden, an outcast. We have animosity because they're always taking. And we don't love the way that we're supposed to love. We don't give them what they're supposed to be given because all they do is take. Well, that's why God made you rich, so that you could continue to give. Some of you made you rich in personality and heart. I had a conversation this morning with somebody who was just so rich in heart that sometimes it makes it to where that tough love that they express, and I'm the same way. I get to this point where I'm so rich here that allows me to pour out, and sometimes we pour out wrong. Sometimes we get to this point where it doesn't come out the way we ever intended it to, or what we ever thought it was going to come out as. But it ends up becoming one of these things where we have these impacts. Sometimes through those rich possibilities and those things that happen, we get these opportunities to have these conversations that would never happen otherwise. Sometimes, things have to happen in order for you to have this conversation. So today I asked you to pray for somebody, and I bet if we had that same prayer right now, that person might be even somebody different. That person might be somebody that you'd look at and go, wow, with all these things that are coming up, because a lot of you are probably going to this point going, if your parents are around still, you might be going, I might want to make a phone call, or I might want to do this, or I might want to have this go on. I will tell you is that it's tough. Because what happens is we get to this point And the question we ask is, what if I feel alone? Because you talk to a lot of people that just feel alone. They can't count on people. I'll tell you is that you're not here today by accident. You look, it's not like we're wrapping it back up and go, oh, see you later. This is this opportunity for us to take time. And instead of being in this hurry, because here's what happens, guys, is that we'll close service, we'll finish, the doors will open, and all of a sudden, the place is empty. And we don't have separate services to make it to where we make it here to where we want you to be able to stay and socialize and get to know one another. Because we know that there's people here that are lonely. You're not here by accident, and I'm not running by accident. I'm running late to where we're going to spend more time together. I'm just going to keep going. No, I'm kidding. But I mean, that's what happens is that you're not here by accident. You're here to be able to spend time with other people, to love one another, and also be inspired and get the Word of God and be able to, how do I start applying this and how do I start making this? I want to tell you is that each and every one of you may not feel it sometimes, but we care about you. We care. We love each one of you. And you're like, oh, which one of us? Each one of you. We love you. We talk about this. We sit back, and Melissa and I, we've always sat back and we go, God has delivered exactly who needs to be at our church. And the question comes down to is a lot of times we go, what did we do wrong? Because sometimes we've done some things wrong, and you guys have loved us through it. So we look and you go, it's amazing on you start looking at it and go, God cares about you and He loves you, but also you guys care about us and love us. Because sometimes you can overlook some of the flaws that we have. Because we do. I'm perfect. She's got some flaws back there, but I know. If you open up Isaiah, if you get into the Bible and you start reading Isaiah 41, it says, don't you be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be dismayed, for I am your God, and I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. Yes, I will uphold you with the right hand of my righteousness. For I'm here with you. I will strengthen you. So right now, if you start looking at this and you start going, well, or I have these things that are going on, and instead of just packing up and walking out, which is what happens a lot of time, start sticking around. I promise you that there's somebody here that's going through the same thing, that's been through the same thing, or is in the same part of life. It's time to start making relationships, because that's what matters. The neighbors. We were told to go to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. Well, you wouldn't run out on them. You wouldn't make this beeline to the door as soon as it was over. You'd be like, I want to hear what's going on. I want to know what the issues are. I want to listen. Now we know that, as if you look around, there's people out there that have got plans, and we understand that. But sometimes make it a plan to stick around here. That's why we do these potlucks. That's why we do the barbecues. We want you to get to know one another and love one another. Let us get to know you. Let us be able to love you. Let us spend some time with you. Let us give you that hug. Let us just listen. We're here to do this as a family. This is your church family. This is maybe more than what you get to spend with some of your real family. So maybe this is your real family. Maybe this is the family that you've been going, I've missed this. It's been here the whole time. You've heard the line, let's get love right. Let's start doing it here. Let's really take away all the other agendas or the hidden things that are going on and just get love right. Just do what God has asked us to do. When He sent His Son here, and He said, I want you to love. I want you to love me, and I want you to love your neighbor. He didn't say, I want you to go collect a whole bunch of stuff. I just want you to love. Let's start loving. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for the example that you've laid out for us. You showed us how to love just through so many different circumstances. Where we think we're busy, there's still time to love, and there's still time to be able to do life with one another and to listen and to still embrace and share a hug. Father, you knew exactly what we needed in order to grow closer to you And your Son gave us the example. Father, we're so thankful that we just get to live through this and bask in it and be part of this community of believers and loving one another and helping one another to where we don't have a burden because we help solve it for one another. Father, we're so thankful for what you're doing. And we ask that you give us the strength to love when it's hard. Not just to the end of the parking lot, but through our neighborhoods and through our homes, and throughout this city and this country and this community, in this world. That you give us this opportunity to just be able to continue to love when the road gets hard, when the trail is narrow, when it looks different than what everybody else is doing. Because you've called us to be set apart. Father, thank you. It's in your Son, Jesus' name, that we pray. Amen.